morning. My name is Bobby Rendon, and what I'm going to talk about this morning is a little bit about early, or I would say late Spanish, maybe a little bit into the Mexican era. But these are some of the artifacts or some of the tools that the early settlers might have had when they were doing their everyday work. And I think I'm going to start off with this over here. This over here is what's called a saddle tree. This is what's underneath all that fancy leather that you see on the saddle. It starts out just with a wooden frame, and then it goes over to this step over here, which is another wooden frame like you saw over there, but it's covered with a type of leather that's called rawhide. This one has a little bit left on it, and after they would have that wooden frame, they would form that wet rawhide on that frame, set it out in the sun, and when it would dry, it would shrink and make a nice strong base for that saddle. Then they'd go ahead and put all that fancy leather that we see on the saddle today. These are something else that they would use in the old days, and we still use these today. These are what's called saddle bags, and they would fit on the back of the saddle like this. And when the men from a particular ranch would go out and go from one ranch to another, if they were going to work cattle that day, they would put whatever they need, whatever they thought they might need for the day in the saddlebags. Maybe some jerky, some biscuits, paperwork, whatever they thought they might need. This is something else they used in the old days. These are what are called spurs. These would fit on the back of the rancher's boot. And these are just to signal the horse, just to let the horse know what he wants him to do. If he wants the horse to speed up, he could tap him with his spurs, and the horse would automatically know to go a little faster. If he had to get away from, say, a band of wild Indians or something like that, or maybe if a bull was coming after him, decided to get a little ornery and come after him, he could tap his horse with his spurs, and he could get away from the bad situation. And you wouldn't want to beat up your horse with your spurs too bad, or not at all, because in the first place it's not good to be cruel to animals, and in the second place, if you're out in the pasture several miles out and you hurt your horse too bad, you might have to walk home. Not a good idea. These are something else that they used in the old days. These are what are called branding irons. This is what the settlers would use to mark their cattle or their horses. These are like an ID mark for animals. What they would do is they would make like a big campfire, and they would have several of these branding irons in the fire, get them red hot, and each ranch had their own particular brands. And these are more examples of early Spanish brands over here. What they would do, men from the ranch would get on their horses, saddle up, go out in the pasture, round up the cattle, and bring them into work that the campfire, like we were talking about, was. If they were going to rope a particular cow, one man on his horse would rope the head on the cow, another one would rope the back legs of the cow. They would knock it down, and then one of the men on the ground would pick up a hot iron, branding iron from the fire, press it up against that cow, and it would burn the hair on the hide on that cow. After that healed up, that hair wouldn't grow back, and it would leave that mark, and that's how they identified their cattle. Also, this is something else they used in the old days. These are called leggings. They were used on the bottom part of their leg like that. And when the Spanish first came into Texas, they found out real quick that everything down here in South Texas is going to sting you, stab you, or bite you. And those were just a little added protection when they were horseback, or if they were riding on their horse. You know, it might keep them from getting a thorn stuck in their leg, or if they were walking in the brush, might save them from a rattlesnake bite. And also in the old days, they didn't have malls where you could go out and get you a new pair of boots if you wore out your boots. So that was just another way they had to make their boots last a little bit longer. Something else they would carry, all the men would carry a little bag of some sort, because in the old days men's pants didn't have pockets, so they all carried I guess you could say a man's purse. Had coins, whatever, paperwork, whatever they thought they might need. These are some of the other things that they might use. This is one of the types of guns that they used in the old days. This particular gun is called a flintlock musket because it uses a little piece of flint that's on this part of the gun that's called the hammer to make a spark against this piece of steel and ignite the gunpowder and create pressure in the barrel and fire that projectile. It was a little round lead ball that looked like a little marble. This was a flintlock. And in the Army, you had to be able to load and fire these things 3 to 4 times in a minute. And you had to have, also you had to have good front teeth because the cartridges were made out of paper in those days. It was just a little tube of paper that was filled with gunpowder and a musket ball. And one of the steps when you go to load these guns is you tear the end of the cartridge off with your teeth to load the gun. And that's why you had to have at least 4 good front teeth to be in the Army. Something else they would carry in the old days, these guns were also single shot. Every time you wanted to fire the gun, you had to load it. They weren't like a machine gun where you just press the trigger and the gun keeps on firing. And if they didn't have time to load their gun, they carried other things that they thought might keep them safe. They might carry a knife like this, maybe several knives, maybe something like this, a little hatchet. Some people call them tomahawks. This is a really handy tool. You can use it to chop your wood for your campfires or chop your meat to eat. Or also you can use this for defense. And you can also turn it around and use this as a hammer if you have to do some sort of construction work. One other thing that they might carry, if they had enough some extra money or something like that, they'd carry a little sword like this. That whatever they thought would keep them safe, that's what they would carry. Let's see. And these items over here are more military items. This is what's called a canteen. This is what the soldiers would carry their water. And they try to keep these full every time they came to a water source, because if they were in a dry camp, that meant where there wasn't a water source readily available, they would have water if their canteens were full. And this canteen is made out of wood, and that was a good feature in the old days because the water would actually swell the wood, and that would keep the canteen from leaking. This is something else they would carry if you were a soldier. This is called a cartridge box. This is what they carried their cartridges in. And this is one other item that the military would use. This is called a haversack, and this is what the soldiers would carry their personal items in, maybe a spoon, a plate, fork, paperwork, money if they had any. They would carry them in a little haversack like this. And we talked about the musket a little bit ago, and this is something else. If you were in the military, they would issue you. This is called a bayonet, and this fits on the end of the musket like this. And if you didn't have time to load your gun, or if your gun wasn't working properly, at least you have some way to defend yourself. It's called a bayonet. This is the kind of drinking cups they used in the old days, made out of tin. Sometimes they would have other cups that were made out of clay, but they preferred these because you could bang them around if you were horseback or if you were in camp and they wouldn't break. The clay cups would break pretty easily. And we talked about this gun being a flintlock. You would use a little piece of flint stone to make a spark. Well, this is what flint would look like if you found it out in the field and you had to form another flint for your musket. This is what it would look like. And this is the type of flashlights they used in the old days, just a candle. Batteries not included, by the way. And that's about all we have this morning. If there's any questions, just contact the park and maybe can answer some of these questions. So thanks for coming out or looking at our little presentation. Thank you.